In this video, I want to help you to think about what is on your sin list. You know, if you are a pursuer of God, if you're someone who says, I want to pursue God, I want to pursue the God of the Bible, one of the things that means is that you want to live to honor God, that you don't just live for yourself anymore. You don't just do whatever you want to do, but you say, well, God, what is it that you want me to do? You find out what pleases God, and then you do that thing. And so when you're thinking about those things, you might say, well, I'm going to make a list. I'm going to make a list of things that honor God and things that don't honor God. And certainly you could try to do that. In fact, I encourage you to try to do that. But the problem is you're going to come up with a list of clear black and whites. You know, like, for example, it's wrong to have an affair, or pornography is wrong, or, you know, getting just blasted drunk is wrong. So you're going to have some things that are really clear. And depending on your culture and depending on your upbringing, you might have certain things on that list. And of course, your job as a Christian is to say, well, I want the things on the list that God says are on the list. I don't just want those things that my culture says are on the list, but I want to know what God really says. And so that's going to take reading the Bible for yourself. And so that might take a while. But it's not just the black and white list that you're going to end up with. You're also going to end up with what I would call a gray area list, right? There's going to be this gray area because, you know, some people say, well, dancing's wrong. Some people say, well, drinking's just wrong flat out. Some people say, you know, you can't watch certain movies or you shouldn't watch TV. So the gray area is where it starts to get a little tricky. And this is where it's hard to really make a list. Now, the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans had to deal with this when he's writing to the church in Rome. And in chapter 14, he's talking about gray areas. Again, he's not talking about the clear black and white stuff. Okay, so we're not talking about whether or not you can get blasted drunk, right? He's talking about gray areas. Well, how should we live in those gray areas? How should we think about that sin list? And here's what he says. Yes, each of you will give a personal account to God. So let's stop condemning each other and decide instead to live in such a way that you will not cause another believer to stumble and fall. Now, I encourage you to go and read that entire chapter in context, but the basic thing he's teaching is this. Listen, guys, in the gray areas, if you want to honor God, the bottom line is you have to be submitted to God. See, it's a heart issue thing. He says, each individual believer has to recognize that he has to be submitted to God. So here's a great way to think about it. Here's a great rule of thumb, because everyone's gray area list might be a little different. But the great rule of thumb is this. The question that I would ask my kids, the people that I mentor, anyone, is this. Listen, are you submitted to God? Or do you have the attitude that says, I don't care what God says. I don't care what you say. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life. Well, listen, if that's your attitude, I can tell you right off the bat, that's the wrong way to approach the issue. If your heart is a heart that says, listen, I want to grow because I want to honor God, you're going to have a submitted heart, and it's going to affect the gray areas, not just the black and white, hopefully those, but it's also going to affect the gray areas. So try that exercise. Make a list, black and white areas, gray areas, and then ask yourself this question. At the end of the day, do I have a heart that is submitted to God, not just a heart that says, I'm going to do whatever I want?